Hey everyone, I'm Ryan,
And I'm Olivia.
and welcome to the seventh episode of Finding True North. Finding True North is all about sharing pivotal lessons and moments that can help you to shape and navigate your career. And Olivia, what do we have coming up today?
Well, we have a very, very important topic for the times that we're in right now. Since being at home due to the pandemic, we're seeing an array of social injustices, and the climate of how to talk about it is becoming very sensitive. And we want to ensure that we can talk about it in the correct way, in a sensitive way. We want to be confident in our conviction when talking about diversity and inclusion, especially to make positive and lasting change. And it's very important to do this in the workplace. Ryan, what do you think about that?
I think you touched upon a really good topic that, what you do in the workplace is so vital and how you make sure you have a diverse and inclusive environment both in your workplace, because in a lot of businesses, like the ones that we've all worked in, you serve a diverse community. So how do you expect to do that without having diverse employees? So I'm really looking forward to jumping into that topic. And Maheen joins us today. She is Diversity Inclusion Lead Advisor at Cancer Research UK, and that is actually a friend of Olivia. I don't know if you want to quickly touch upon your connection before we jump in.
Okay, so Maheen and I met at university when we did student radio together. However, our friendship was cemented by Beyonce's Lemonade album when we watched the whole cinematic album. And by the end, we were pretty much best friends. Since then, we have stayed in touch, been to London plenty of times. And I trust Maheen so much to talk about this topic as our resident expert. And you can ask Maheen a question live. So Ryan's going to explain how you can ask Maheen a question.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can ask a question throughout the series. So you can either do it in the comments section below on whatever device you're listening to, and we'll also be using slido.com a bit later. So I'll show you the code a bit later on when we do the poll and the Q&A towards the end. But I will pass it over now to Maheen. Thank you for joining us.
Hi everyone. Bear with me if I have any technical issues because that's not my area of expertise. So I'm just going to move over to the slides. And I'm just going to talk to you a bit about my career journey, where I started off and how I got to where I am now. So way back when in 2010, when I was doing my A-levels, I had 4 A-levels like most people. So I did maths, further maths, English and history. And then I really thought I was going to do maths as a career, and that was something accountancy or whatever it was. And then after my AAS levels, I realised that I actually wasn't that good at maths and had to look to do something different. And the one thing I really, really enjoyed doing was English. So I chose to do that then at university. I didn't know what career I was going to have or where that was going to take me, but I just knew I really enjoyed it. Kind of on recommendations with teachers and stuff, I decided to pursue that. So I went to the University of Southampton, which is where I met Olivia, and did my BA in English. No, that's my master's English literature. And then whilst I was at uni, I did quite a few other things while I was there. So in my first year, I worked as a student tour guide, which is a bit random, but it was a good way to earn money. And I was employed by the university. And then the next year, and then for the subsequent years I was at university, I also worked as a receptionist in the Students' Union, which was great money and just a good way to kind of work while also doing a degree. Learned really good personal communication skills and everything else that came from that. And I also tapped into the opportunities that the university offered. So started radio, which Olivia explained, which is when we met. I did that, and it was a bit of an experience. I don't love my voice on radio. Is one thing I learned from that, but I learned some great technical skills of how to edit and do audio editing, and met a bunch of really great people and worked out where that media career could take me. And that's initially what I wanted to pursue. And then got to the end of my degree, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and decided to do a master's because I still really, really loved English as a subject and did English literary studies. And whilst I was doing that, I came across Enaxis, which is a social enterprise organisation which most universities have. And one of the things I worked on was Sanico, which was all about empowering female entrepreneurs. And we were talking about making reusable sanitary towels. And helping women in Kenya, specifically this one village in Kenya, which the organisation had founded links with, to help them set up businesses there, to help support a lot of women in the local area. So that was one thing I did, which kind of pushed me into that social enterprise charity world. And then I ended up looking for internships whilst I was in the middle of my master's degree, because master's is a full year rather than September to July. So in summer, I decided to apply for an internship and got one at Cancer Research UK, which was great. It was pretty much exactly where I wanted to be, because it's the largest charity in the UK. So it was really, really exciting. And I worked in their corporate partnerships team, doing marketing and working with a lot of their big partners, so Tesco's and other big companies that they partner with to fundraise and educate their staff. I really, really enjoyed that, really enjoyed the charity sector, having been there for 3 months. Didn't get a job straight away. I actually finished my master's, went traveling for a little bit, and then temped, really, as a receptionist, using those skills I developed in the student union. And then decided to apply for a research executive job. And I only found out about this job while I was interning. I didn't even know this job existed. And then the job went live 3 months later, and I got the job, and it was doing business research, making sure that the companies we were going to partner with were reputable and there wasn't any reputational risk was the main part of my job. And obviously as a health charity, making sure that their strategy aligned with ours. So that was really, really interesting. I did that for about 11 months. And then decided that I wanted to do something more marketing based. And so I moved to a team that worked with the NHS and Macmillan. So the team focused on improving cancer pathways, and it was really, really interesting, a bit challenging for me because I didn't have a degree in science or health communications or anything like that. But I learned a lot from it, and got to do a bunch of different things while I was there, including video editing, and I took a marketing qualification as well while I was doing that job. And that was when my organisation started on their diversity and inclusion agenda. So one of the first things I did was become chair of the Multi-Faith Network, which was quite exciting. It was new in the organisation at the time. And then from there onwards in 2019 was the real turning point, which I'll talk about in a moment. But 2019, me and my good friend Dania reinvigorated the BAME network at Cancer Research UK. So just for context, BAME is Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic. And that was huge. And that was a whole lot of work went into that. And again, I'll touch upon it in a moment. And really just changed the course of my career. And then following on from that, I got a job as the organisation's diversity and inclusion advisor. So what I do now is advise on internal comms. So what we tell our organisation, how we communicate that, what awareness pieces we're doing. I also support all of our staff networks. And again, that's the subject I'm going to talk upon a bit later. But all or most organisations will have staff networks where they hear the views and experiences of their employees, specifically from different characteristics. So I support all of those networks and various other, our organisation's 4,400 people. So we have people in different departments, and they are inclusion champions who come together to create a more inclusive culture. So I support them. So that's the main aspect of my job. And from that job, a lot of opportunities have arisen for me personally. So one of the things I applied to do was Runnymede Reframing Race Programme. So Runnymede is a race think tank, and at the moment I'm working with 30 other activists to reframe the public conversation around race, racism and race equality. So it's really, really interesting. I get to meet people from a bunch of different sectors, people who are already passionate about this subject and come with great ideas. So I'm still on that program now. Another thing I'm working on, another company I'm working with is TNON. So TNON is the network of networks. So they're a group that bring together BAME networks from across the country and are a forum for sharing best practice. And from that group, I've met people, again, from a range of sectors who come across the same challenges as diversity and inclusion. And it's just a great place to brainstorm and work through those ideas and meet a lot of other people. And then more recently, the thing I've started on my own is our key workers. So we know BAME communities have been harder hit by the COVID pandemic. But at the beginning of the project, there was a lot of emphasis on healthcare workers and showing what an amazing job they're doing. And they're doing an absolutely amazing job. I think the one key thing that was missing for me was where the ethnic minority key workers, they weren't getting as much representation. So our Key Workers is a platform for ethnic minority key workers to share their stories. And that's not just healthcare key workers, that's people working in councils and legal services, anything and everything really. So that's a whistle-stop tour of my career and how I ended up where I ended up. Just going to move on. So the pivotal moment for me was this. This is a picture from our BAME network launch. And this was huge because diversity and inclusion was on the agenda, but it wasn't really going anywhere. And me and Dania, who you can see, who's standing behind me in the blue dress, really wanted to push it forward, as did many other people in the organisation. And we worked really closely with our diversity and inclusion manager at the time to make sure that BAME voices were heard in the organisation. We knew there were a number of issues that staff were facing and that recruitment wasn't as good as it could be. And we really felt like we could add value to the organisation in doing this. So that's where it started. It started with me and Dania in a room with no one. And then by the end of the 3 months, we had all of these amazing people. 14 committee members who had taken on initiatives of their own, and we had this massive launch event which around 200 members of the organisation attended, and from there onwards the network has gone from strength to strength and the organisation is improving alongside it. So that was really my key moment. This role was addition to my day job and it pushed me more than any other day job, but it's something I'm really proud of and got me to where I am today. So I think I'm going to hand over to Ryan now for the poll.
Yes, so to take part in the poll, this is where we used Slido.com. So to Slido.com and use the code FTN, which stands for Finding True North, and you'll be able to participate in the question that Maheen's put to you. So do you think organisations have a responsibility to speak out about societal issues? We will revisit the responses to this answer at the end during the Q&A, so that gives you all a chance to participate. Back to you, Maheen.
Thank you. So, diversity and inclusion. So I'm just going to touch briefly on what this means. I know people will have different levels of understanding and it's kind of, we're all working through it, it's changing every day really. So most companies will have diversity and inclusion on their agenda, whether this is a person who's running it or a team or a network or in some capacity, every organisation should have it. And it's really, really important. So we know our society is rampant with inequalities from everything from the healthcare system to the education system, many of which have been heightened by recent events. And media representation and the working world is all part of that. All of those inequalities seep into the working world and companies are not immune from this. When we're talking about diversity, we're talking about a number of characteristics, many of which you'll be familiar with, race, gender, sexuality, for example. But we're also talking about things like class, neurodiversity, introverts versus extroverts. We're all individuals and we all have different characteristics and different personalities. So in general, we know a few things about companies that are more diverse. They make better decisions faster, and that gives them a serious advantage over their competitors. Diverse companies are able to provide insight into needs of more of their customer base and connect with a broader range of audiences, which is really, really important. A workforce of individuals with a range of experiences also produces increased creativity and innovation. So as you can imagine, when you get together with a bunch of people who are really, really different and you start having a conversation, loads of different ideas come out and loads of those ideas will be good and kind of can be put to use for the company. So diversity and inclusion encapsulates a lot of things. I think at the core of it, it's about equal opportunities. It's about making sure everyone can do the job they need to do and an organisation can perform in the best way possible. So just a couple of key stats for you, I guess, is there are 1 billion people across the world today with some form of a disability, which is 15% of the world's global population. And along with their friends, family and communities, disabled people worldwide have a disposable income of $8 trillion, which is a huge amount of money that companies are potentially missing out on if they don't tap into these communities. Similarly, in 2017, the McGregor Smith Review announced that there was a potential boost of £24 billion to the UK economy if employers got race equality in the workplace right. So there's a huge kind of financial gain for organisations there. But diversity and inclusion is also very personal. People will face different challenges and issues in the workplace, and my job and the job of people who like me in networks is to support people to make sure they can do the job they've been employed to do. They can have successful career progression, they feel comfortable at work, they feel able to thrive, they feel able to share their ideas, because that's really, really important in the workplace. Just going to move to the next one. So staff networks. I'm a huge advocate for staff networks. Staff networks are a bunch of people, employees who come together to tackle key issues related to their particular demographic is normally, so for example, a BAME network who will tackle issues around race, a gender network, the LGBTQ plus network. Networks are a great space. I would really recommend joining them when you join a workplace for a number of reasons. So you get to learn skills that you don't get in your day job. Like I said, when I joined the network, I was pushed beyond anything I'd ever done in the workplace before. So it's great personal development. I personally got to build a strategy. I got access to senior leadership. And when it's important in an organization, senior leadership will make time for those involved in the network. You might get time with them that you wouldn't have got in your ordinary day job. You'll also gain really great skills like project management, organizing events, how to better communicate. I suddenly had to stand up and present in front of heads of my department, which I'd never done before. So personal development is a huge thing that you get from this. Networking opportunities are also a big thing to come from this. So that's social and professional networks. So one of the things that I gained by joining a network was just a really good group of friends. So I talk about Dania. I'm still good friends with Dania today, and a lot of people that are shared in that picture, pretty much all of them, I'm still really good friends with. They form a great support system at work, and that's really, really important. So the social aspect of meeting people who you wouldn't normally meet in an organisation brings an incredible value. But likewise, there are also lots of professional opportunities that come from this. So you can gain mentoring, you can gain peer-to-peer mentoring and workshops. You can kind of go to internal events, external events where you can meet a lot of people. By extension, you can join companies like Network, Tenon, for example, where you'll meet people in different sectors, and that may even help you move jobs. It's just a really great way to upskill yourself again, kind of broaden your horizons, and meet new people. The last thing I want to touch on is emotional intelligence. So diversity and inclusion is personal for a lot of people, and not everyone will have the awareness or language of how to tackle these issues, or even fully understand the extent of some of what is playing out in organizations. So emotional intelligence is key. It's about how to handle yourself and how to handle relationships. And again, I've gained a lot from this, having to kind of stand up in front of leadership who may not have the same views as you and counter them and kind of make them see what employees are experiencing. Has brought around a lot of resilience for me. And I know a lot of people I've worked with, there's also a lot of conflict management in terms of, people might be saying things in an office, unconscious bias coming through, recruitment issues, and that's about checking yourself, your emotions, and being able to come up with solutions and also talk to people to influence them. And influence an organization's culture is a really, really big thing of diversity and inclusion. It's something that takes a lot of time, but you gain this skill from it. And I think, having spoken to a lot of people, this skill is valuable in any area of work that you do. So emotional intelligence is another thing you get from joining a network. So how to create an inclusive culture network for life and work. So Olivia posed this question to me, and it's kind of a big question. So I've gone for kind of a broad number of things. One, it seems really, really simple, but talk to your colleagues, your classmates, and your friends. There are a lot of things that are not visible to us. There are a lot of things that people don't share with us. And there are a lot of things you may not know if you don't share that same perspective. So just talking to people can just make you more empathetic and make you more aware of the world around you. Talk to someone, but also really listen to them and understand their experiences and don't discredit them. I think is really, really important, especially in the workplace. I see this a lot of people being dismissive of other people's experiences. Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That's really, really important. And also just the understanding that not everyone is going to want to share with you. We're not friends with everyone, and not everyone will trust you. So you have to take the time to cultivate those relationships. And then again, that's where the emotional intelligence comes into this. But I think it's good advice for life and work as well. I have a lot of friends who we're similar in certain aspects, but in others we're very, very different. And actually those are the viewpoints I appreciate the most, because I know they're going to push me or say, you know, I actually don't think you're right on this, or have you considered this? And that's more valuable than just someone who agrees with you all the time. Finding your community or creating a community. So of course you can create your own community, but you can also find networks and societies at university. And I think it's a really, really good way. It's kind of like finding your people at work. You will need a support system in some way to kind of brainstorm ideas or talk about things that are happening. And I think that's really, really important, personally and professionally, to have those people you trust, who you can go to, a range of people, like I said, who you can share issues with, but also kind of console you in the moment if that needs to be. At university, when you're away from home, that space is also really, really important to have a support system. And yeah, I think that's huge. One thing I would say is when you're creating a community and you want to impact change, make sure you get some sort of leadership involved in that. For a network especially, make sure you get buy-in from your senior leadership to move that conversation along, because you need people with decision-making abilities to have those conversations with you, but also push your agenda forward in spaces that you're not in. But the community is the heart of that, and then that moves further down the line. And the last thing is, again, fairly simple, but it needs to be said because sometimes we all forget. I think it's about broadening your horizons. We all kind of see the world the way we see the world, and we're exposed to certain things, and based on our circumstance, our education, our background, everything like that, that's how we see the world. And part of this is follow different people on social media, read different newspaper outlets, talk to different people to understand and become more empathetic. Like I said, it's about connecting with people who are different to you to kind of come to that common place. More often than not, you'll have a lot of common views. And if you don't, at least you'll be able to understand or argue why they should feel or see things a different way. Because if you don't understand where they're coming from, it's really hard to challenge views like that. So yeah, those are my 3 key tips.
Thank you very much, Maureen. So moving on to Q&A. If you move to the next slide, it will just tell you how to take part. You have a couple options. You can either ask in the comment section, or you can go to slido.com where you take part in the poll, and you can also ask questions through there. So to kick off, we've actually got a question that's already come in. Should companies focus on increasing diversity at the executive level?
Yes. 100% yes. I said it before. I think you need to have diversity across all levels of the organization. What we often see is lower levels, and that takes a really long time for then a company to change their culture, because a lot of those people are not in the rooms when key decisions are being made. And if you're not in the room, you don't get to have your point across. And that's really, really important. So yeah, at board level, that's where a lot of power lies, and that's where companies should focus on their increasing their diversity.
I think just adding on to that point, I've seen it in different companies where they do a lot of things for junior levels to get in that pipeline. They do a lot at the senior levels as well, around like board positions, etc., senior leadership. But then there's also that gap in the middle where actually your pipeline that you're getting in is dropping off because they're going elsewhere, because you're not retaining it, and they're your next senior managers after they've made it through the pipeline. So it's like everything you have to think about, that complete pipeline generation.
Yeah.
And Olivia, from your end, do you have a question to kick off?
Yeah, Maheen, thank you so much for telling us your career journey, but of course, putting the emphasis as to why a role such as yours is fundamental to the success of an organization and the happiness of all, well, hopefully all of the employees in the organization as well. I think it's very important, and I'm so glad that you kind of found this niche for yourself, because it's very important work, and I guess it's very fulfilling as well. Of course, you touched upon lots of benefits as to joining a network for diversity and inclusion, such as emotional intelligence, career prospects, and more. there's lots of benefits here. And if you're an organization and you lack a diversity and inclusion network or group, what would be the best place for them to start, whether it's introduced from a corporate level, or there is another employee who thinks that is a great thing to do, but they're not sure where to start, who to bring in, who they should be allowed in the group? What advice do you give to those two sectors?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I guess it depends on the size of your organization and what your leadership think. I think number one is find people who are aligned with your cause. You can rarely do anything on your own. So find your Dania or whoever it is who's going to support you, and every other person in the network who comes along for that journey. That's a good place to start. Connect with your HR teams, because I think the one thing that a lot of emphasis goes on diversity and inclusion networks to really move the agenda forward, but that's a role they're taken in addition to their day jobs. It's something they're not being paid for. It's sometimes not something they have time for. So definitely connect with HR, who should be able to kind of carry some of that workload and get a senior level buy-in. That is your big thing, is what I always recommend to people, because there's loads you can do on the ground and that's amazing, but you need that push further along. And if you can secure that buy-in early on, that's really going to elevate this journey of yours. And be prepared, I think, for the emotional labor that will come with it. It's a lot of work to be in a network and advocate for something you should have, but maybe don't have. So be prepared for all of that.
Great.
So we've had another question come in. There's a couple actually, so let me go with this one. So how do you deal with pushback or conflicting views from within networks and across an organization? And then there's a follow-on, it's about 2 questions. How do you keep your passion to stay motivated against those challenges?
So the first one was about conflicts within the network.
And the organization.
And the organization. So I'll touch on the network. Networks are broad. So if we look at BAME, for example, BAME encompasses everyone who basically isn't white British. So BAME is Black, Asian, minority, ethnic. So not everyone is going to think the same way. So obviously there are going to be differences. And I think you have to kind of accept that. That comes with the conflict management stuff, and it comes as a bit of a democracy. You're there as a network. You're supposed to be having those discussions internally. You're not supposed to agree on every single thing that's coming your way. But if you can have the discussions, something will probably come out of that, which is really, really positive. With the organization, I think that's a bit harder. Networks tend to be, hopefully, a safe space where you can have those conversations. You might get a bit of pushback from an organization on how to handle it. The one thing I would say, having been in a situation where I was like, I don't know what to do in this moment, do your research, come prepared with your facts, your stats, and the arguments, kind of brainstorm all of those potential questions that could come to you. That's going to be what moves you forward. It's one thing I learned, and because it was really, really hard, just come prepared and know your argument.
How does that sort of link as well to, like we spoke before this episode around having difficult conversations as well. And I guess in an organization, when you hear something said that's maybe incorrect or just not the right way of approaching it, how do you go about calling out bad behaviors?
I think there's a number of ways to do it. It really depends on the organization, and it really depends on the individual. If they're more senior than you, are they your peer? How comfortable you are with them? Obviously, there's a way to kind of say it in the middle of the room. I don't agree with you, but I think what often works better is a softer approach. Something I have tried, which works quite well, is, oh, why do you think that? Or could you explain that to me? I don't quite understand what you're trying to say. And then often when people have to try and explain it, they end up connecting the dots between what they said and why they shouldn't have said it. But obviously, there are proper procedures you can go through and talk to managers, etc. But I always kind of like to start with that, because more often than not, a lot of people will just be oblivious, and it's not an excuse. I think calling it out is important, but the way you do it will often lead to either a really defensive reaction or a conversation, and that's going to be the difference between whether these conversations are happening in the workplace or not.
Okay. I'm just looking through the questions here. Let me just have a look. Ryan, just to double check, there's a question about application. Is this the one where it's about a small company startup? Is that the question?
Oh, there's a couple questions. You can go with that one and I'll cover the other one afterwards.
Okay. So somebody asks you, Maheen, what would you suggest to someone who is joining a small company or startup and would like to create a network, but maybe does not have the colleagues to make one?
So I've never worked at a small company, so I don't know.
So you want to set up a network, but there's nobody who would be your member number two, so to speak.
Yeah, I think
So what
allies
do you do?
are an important part of this conversation. So even if they don't fall within the same demographic, you will still find people who are allies of your cause and are keen to support you. I think in a startup, I'm speaking hypothetically again because I don't know. Theoretically, it's a smaller company, so you should have closer links to leadership. So you should be able to start those conversations, and ideally, as a company grows, then you can form a bigger network. Or I guess you could maybe connect with other startups. But honestly, I've only worked in a really big company before, so I actually don't know.
I see. I guess to touch upon that topic, it leads into the bigger question on if you are forming a network, whether it's BAME or anything else, who do you allow into the group, or do they have to be in the demographic that you're championing, or can they be allies who maybe are not fitting into that demographic, but yes, still believe in the cause and still want to support you or others in what you want to talk about and change? Is that also okay, or is that not allowed?
No, I think that's really important. The role of allies is super important, especially if you are a minority in any sense in a company. There will just not be enough of you to lobby change, and often you won't be in positions of power. But also you need to take people along with you. So when we relaunched the BAME network, one of the reasons why it didn't work so well was because it was just BAME people talking to BAME people. A lot of us already know those issues and nothing changes because it's kind of in a vacuum. Allies are really important because you're talking to people who might not have any clue about this. So we ran a campaign called Did You Know, which was highlighting inequalities in the workplace. And the reaction was, I did not know any of this. So there's a big awareness gap there. And more people do become allies as they become better educated. And that is part of the network's role. But then they also use their voice to advocate for causes such as this. And that's really, really powerful because then it's not just the minority advocating, it's everyone alongside them who also thinks this is a really good idea and actually is vital and should be done. So yeah, allies are really important. I think in a network space, there's a time for talking and there's a time for listening. And I think if you're an ally, it's just being about respectful when you're in the space. If there's a specific question come to the LGBTQ plus community, and if you're not from that community, just listen. It's your time to listen and learn rather than kind of sharing your views. I think that's really important with being an ally.
I think it brings up it reminds me of actually a scenario that I've been in where you never actually know why people come along as allies. They may not look a certain way, so you may not kind of say, oh, I don't get why you're here, but I know someone who went along to our Special Abilities Network because they had a child who was autistic. So for them, they may not have been autistic, for example, but they were interested in neurodiversity. And you never quite understand, it's not obvious sometimes why people come along. There's a question on what do you think are the important things for companies to do right if they want to encourage applications from a more diverse range of candidates?
That's a big question. I think a few things for companies to do right. Broaden your horizons of where you're recruiting from. So not just from the same universities, and also broaden your talent pipeline. Are you looking at apprenticeships? Are you looking at entry-level jobs? What are your entry requirements? Are those really necessary for the job you're doing? If I'm being honest, the job that I've had and had since, I really did not need a degree to do that. I learned a lot of skills from university, but I probably didn't need the degree to do that job. I think also make sure that the pipeline is clear. We kind of think that diversity ends at recruitment. So you've got someone in the organization and that's great. Is there the opportunity to progress? Can you see people like yourselves at board level? Exactly like Sam said, you need that diversity at leadership. Otherwise, I've had people in my organization be like, no one looks like me. I can't get any further than I am now. So it's not just about seeing yourself. There's a broader conversation of career progression and what are the equal opportunities? Are there equal opportunities to progress in an organization?
And Ryan, to touch in relation to that, what did it's such a big topic. I'm like finding it difficult to speak. What is the result of the poll?
I'm literally just pulling them up to have a look.
Great. Okay. I'm so intrigued.
So 80% said yes, companies should speak out. So actually the question was, do you think organizations have a responsibility to speak out about societal issues? 80% said yes, 20% said not sure, possibly when the issue relates directly to the product or service, and no one said no.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I wanted to talk about, especially in the situation that we're in now, and of course, when we started Fighting True North, we could not have predicted things that we have seen over the last few weeks. Of course, these things have been happening for decades. In such networks, is that a place where you can talk about situations or news stories that happen outside, and you can talk to them, you can talk about them more openly and I guess more constructively inside, so that it can make positive change? Or is that not the type of, are such networks not the right place to have these kind of conversations? What do you think?
I think networks are definitely the place to have this conversation. If your network is a safe space, I think that's really, really important. But, if we look at Black Lives Matter, for example, that's specifically affecting the Black community within the UK as well. So if BAME networks are not having that conversation when something that is so personal and is very much affecting people at work, and, it's a very emotional time for people, we should be having those conversations. And I think networks can elevate the voices that were not necessarily always heard within an organization. And if people are part of a network, hopefully those voices can be carried all the way up to leadership. Because like I said before, networks can sometimes end up in a vacuum, whereas you're talking to people who already know the same thing as you. And that's really important, because those conversations are so important. They're supportive, and you're brainstorming new ideas and everything that comes from it. There's a big trust that comes from a network. But I think in this broader context, those voices should be carried all the way up, and the network can do that.
And do you think it's important that those voices and those opinions are unified and brought up to senior level, so that I guess when companies want to respond to such circumstances, that it's coming from a place of authenticity and correctness, because that it's coming from a source that are representative maybe of the circumstance, and so they're being better advised as to how the company could address it?
Yeah, I think if you're not listening to your staff, what are you doing? Like, that's so important. And you as a company, your staff are a huge part of that. So if you're going to put out something publicly, it has to kind of be authentic to the people internally as well. If they're facing something very different than what you're putting out, there's a huge disconnect there. And that's not great for staff, but it's also not great for your brand. So if, we've seen a lot of brands be criticized for kind of putting statements outwardly, but a lot of their internal diversity stuff is not quite right. Their pay gaps and, all of this kind of stuff. So that is really important. And that's kind of what the networks were created for, to elevate those voices, like I said. But at a specific moment in time, when you want to hear from specific parts of your organization, from specific communities, networks can do that. They can easily tap into people who've been connecting with them for a while, and I think that's really positive.
Great. And Ryan, have you got any other questions, or from the live or from yourself?
So we've had lots from the live. I have one myself, actually.
Fantastic.
Because I always like to think about, how do you turn this into kind of small actions that people can do every day? And like one that I do myself is I like to call out companies when they say stuff which is not particularly right. So for example, there was an energy provider who was about getting like a gas certificate, and on the website they were saying, ask your engineer if he will. And I tweeted them, like DM'd them privately, and I said, do you understand like the unconscious bias you're putting there, that you're essentially saying that engineers are male, which is not true because Olivia is an engineer right here. So they actually changed the website and then put it into their process. So all copy will get reviewed like that. And another one that literally came last night within my own company is that they're moving away from using the term whitelist when you whitelist or blacklist like IP addresses. They're actually going with an allow list and a deny list. So that leads me on to my long-winded question around what are kind of the small actionable things that people can be doing day to day to support diversity, inclusion, whether it's in their own lives or in a work scenario?
I think the first step for me is always self-education and taking ownership of that. Like I said earlier on, not everyone is exposed to the same circumstances. Not everyone kind of sees the world in a certain way. And there's a onus on all of us, like myself included, to kind of check yourself and educate yourself and learn more about where these unconscious biases lie and how they can affect you. That's really important if you're a recruiting manager all the way up to an exec director, because those are going to kind of play in and out of your workspace all the time. So I think education is really, really important. Connecting with people in your organization, I think, is also another key thing. People are not going to have the same experiences. So someone might have a really, really positive experience in a workplace and feel like there isn't any kind of racial intolerance, and someone might have the exact opposite experience. And I think it's always good to work out what people are saying broadly in an organization and where everyone stands and why they feel that way, just to kind of learn more about the culture that you're in.
Thank you so much for joining today. I'm just going to pass over to Olivia to kind of wrap up and see what's coming next.
Yeah, sure. But I did have one more question. Can I ask
go
one
ahead.
more? Is that okay? Sure. Being a bit cheeky here. No, Maheen, it's just I'm listening to you speak, and I just cannot like stop by just feeling so proud that you've taken upon such a monumental task to help represent diversity and inclusion in workplaces. It's no easy thing, and I cannot imagine that it was easy to start. But I'm just really proud that you're taking upon this role. And I just wanted to know, and probably other people in the audience are wondering, what led you to enter this space? Was there something from maybe like from childhood traits, like this sense of justice and the ability to speak up for others? Do you know where it came from?
First, I want to say it definitely wasn't me. Ending up here has been hard work, but the huge support of a number of other people. All those people in the picture you saw were a huge reason of why I've ended up where I have ended up now. I think if you're doing this by yourself, you just won't be able to. You need a really supportive network around you. So that's really, really important. Why I ended up where I ended up was honestly because I just wasn't happy with my company culture, if I'm being honest. I think it's why a lot of people end up in this space. A lot of people end up here by accident. I ended up here by accident. You know, you see things and you're not happy with them, you disagree, and then suddenly an opportunity arises for you to kind of share those views and make some change. And instead of moaning about it in a kitchen in the office, which we all do, networks are an opportunity to impact some change and get people to listen to you. So yeah, that was one of my key things to say, which is take all opportunities that come your way, especially opportunities like this. I know this is a topic of conversation, an area of interest for a lot of people. And not everyone is given the opportunity to have their voice heard and impact some, even if it's small change in an organization. And if you are, take it.
Oh, great. Thanks so much for that advice. I'm sure there's lots of people who probably needed to hear that, experiencing things on their own or realizing that other people are feeling the same thing, but they're not sure how to channel that energy into something constructive. I think that, the advice that you've given today can really allow both companies and employees to move forward positively. And I really look forward to the day where there's more diversity and inclusion from junior level all the way to senior level. But hopefully we'll get there. I'm optimistic, but yeah, Maheen, thanks so much for you and your friends and your colleagues for being part of that effort and teaching us the right way how to do it. So on that note, we're going to go on to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm on it.
Great, right. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in into this Finding True North episode. We hope that you found it helpful, you found it constructive, and you learned something new. If you liked Maheen's episode so much that you want to watch it again, you can. This video is going to be available on YouTube forever, hopefully. And of course, if you're more of a reader, then this episode is going to be summarized in a PDF that we call an episode highlight document. It will have Maheen's slides. It will have some extra questions that we can answer on this live. So if you still want to ask a question, still send them in by Slido. We'll be releasing this PDF on the Tech Allies Network website, and the URL is on the screen here and also on the YouTube description. That will be on Friday, the 19th of June. Next episode is going to be next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. We're going to be joined by my other university friend, Sam, who was with me on my first day of university and my last, from bachelor's to PhD. He'll be talking about his journey through engineering and how he got into the Entrepreneur's First program to start his own company. But until then, Maheen, thank you so much coming on and being the resident experts that you are on diversity and inclusion with the support of your friends. And we wish you all the best in your career because you're doing something really important.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Maheen. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Thanks. Bye.